Hi everyone, I'm really sorry about that, technical difficulties, but I'm sure as part of the virtual world that we've all been living in the last few years, where we're all used to this, but we're back up and running. I'm Anita Walker, I'm an early talent acquisition advisor here at CMS. We've done a bit of a shapeshift, so no longer a cat, it's going to be me leading today's session, all about presence and communicating with impact. Now, for those of you that have joined us on previous sessions, you know the drill, but for those of you that are new, you can interact with Karen on the chat function. So Karen is another advisor in the early talent team, and she's going to be answering all of your queries this afternoon. We're also really excited to be joined by an expert who I will introduce in a moment, but they will be running a Q&A at the end of today's session. So any burning questions on the topic, presence and communicating with impact, please do get those posted into the chat and Karen will get those all set for you. So before we introduce this session, I just wanted to start by asking you a quick poll. So it's up on your screen now, hopefully, in terms of how confident do you feel about communicating with impact and with presence. So on a scale of 1 to 5 being 1 being extremely confident to kind of 5 being not really at all. So while I'm giving you some time to have a think about how confident you feel, I'm really, really excited to introduce our guest speaker and expert for this afternoon, Sharon. Give us a wave, Sharon. So Sharon is an executive coach, and she has been coaching for 20 years, but is a firm friend and has been training in just this topic and coaching for about 4 years now at all levels, from trainee level all the way up to partner. And she's a really, really, really expert in this area and also has a particular interest in kind of the early talent space. So we're really excited for her to take you through presence, communicating with impact, and just how important it is going to be, not just in terms of getting you prepared to ace your applications, but just how important communicating with presence, making your mark, being authentically you whilst doing it is going to stand you in really great stead for your future careers. So I've just had the results of those polls in, and we can see a lot of you seem quite confident, which is good, but no one is very, very confident. And some of you are kind of quite confident on the fence with that. So hopefully at the end of the session, we can see that shift to you all being very confident or extremely confident. And I have no doubt after Sharon's words of wisdom, that's how you will feel. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to this said Sharon, who's going to take you through the session and hopefully inspire you and give you lots of wise words. Over to you, Sharon.
Wow, thank you, Anita. That was a really nice introduction. Welcome everyone to this session. And I do hope that the poll results will be very different once we've done the session. So we've got about 40 minutes today to talk through this webinar, and hopefully by the end of the session we'll see some really different results. So what we're going to cover today is the keys to success. What's going to help you be more successful in your communication? We're going to look at how you can understand how to deliver your message with true connection and confidence. So it's about being your true self. We're looking at how you're going to demonstrate effective language that has impact. So you're not just rambling, you're really clear about your language and how you're communicating your point. We're looking at how you're going to articulate yourself throughout the application process, right from the very beginning, and develop that self-awareness. So self-awareness is really the key to confidence. The most confident people I know are the ones that are most self-aware, because they know themselves. They know what they're talking about when it's to do with them, because they know who they are and what they represent. And we'll understand the different approaches required for face-to-face in the virtual world. So little changes that you can make that will make a real difference from going from that virtual world that we've all been living in to the face-to-face world. So great, I'm going to start talking about your brain. So my background is NLP, and that's neuro-linguistic programming. And that's a really long way of saying the patterns of how the brain works. So there's been lots and lots and lots of studies before this model was developed, and basically what the model says is the brain works in a certain way, And those patterns help create how we behave, how we communicate. So I'll talk about the brain. We have two parts to our brain that are really important here. So we have the conscious mind that sits at the front of our brain and our unconscious mind. So our conscious mind is really, really busy. So every second it's taking in 2 million bits of information, which is a huge amount of information. But actually it can only process 7 plus or minus 2. So what it's looking to do is to match the rest. So your conscious mind will take in all the information, and there's tiny little pathways called neurological pathways, and they're like a little current that connects to the unconscious. And when it's connecting, it's looking for, how is this the same? What can I relate this to? And this is why when you go into the interview process, you can be quite nervous or not understand, because the brain doesn't have that certainty. So if you think about anything you've done that's new, it might be going to uni for the first time. That apprehension, that not knowing what to expect, is our brain's way of telling us, is there any risk, or is there anything that we need to know, which means that we can make more sense of the world. And this is going to be really important when we understand the growth mindset and there's no failure, only feedback. So Anita's just going to move us on to the next slide. So the mindset for success. So this is the real starting point. So in NLP, we believe there is absolutely no failure. There is only feedback. And this was a really crazy concept when I first learned it many years ago. I was like, what do you mean there's no failure? You either pass or fail. And the more I've explored it with people in coaching sessions, in training sessions, and even with people in my field, the more we understand that actually failure is just the unconscious way of being lazy. It's a shortcut. So remember how we talked about the neurological pathways, looking for something that makes sense, looking for something to match. Now we're told, and we're taught from a really young age within education, that if you don't pass this, that's not good. So if you fail, this is the end. Something bad's going to happen. You must be successful. You must pass. So the brain's taught this over time, and it's learned how to do failure. So your brain goes, excellent. I know what failure is. I'm going to take a shortcut. I've got a box in my unconscious that knows exactly how to behave, exactly what to do when we fail. So it might be that, you know, Ben and Jerry become your best friends and you're sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. It might be that you talk about limiting beliefs, you quit, you don't try it again. But actually, if we begin to approach this with the feedback model, then things become different. And the unconscious doesn't like it. Because, oh gosh, that means we need to take action. We need to do something that's going to mean that the end result is different. So think about this for a bit. If you go into the application process, or actually anything in your life with I can't fail, I'm just going to get feedback, then what begins to happen is at each stage of the journey, you're looking at where the journey didn't go to plan. So for example, if you're applying for a certain position, you've done your application and you haven't been shortlisted for the next stage, you know, what is the feedback? What can I learn about this application? Is there anything that I could look at, or could I get feedback from the organisation I applied to, which means next time is going to be a success? So at each stage there will be success, but you may need to look for feedback as you're going along, as you go through this journey. And the more we begin to approach things with this feedback model, the easier it is for your mind to go, oh, okay, I need to get some feedback. It doesn't automatically go straight to the failure mode. So just think about this and really begin to embrace this mindset as you begin your journey through the application process and through all these recruitment stages. What will I learn along the way? And assume success. Assume there will always be something positive at each stage, but there may need to be tweaks from the learning along the way. Great. So let's talk about what's relevant. And Gina, so many times I've been really blessed that I've worked with lots of people who have been applying for a traineeship within CMS. And they're like, I don't know what to put on my application, or I've applied a few times, but I haven't been successful. And so we sit and we say, actually, well, what are you including in your application? Well, I don't know what's relevant. So somebody that is a really good example of this is a person I worked with who was a guides leader. And she's like, oh, my guides isn't important. I said, well, tell me a little bit about the role that you did within guides. And she said, well, actually, I was quite high up in guides, and I was responsible for a big volunteering mission to Africa where we taught English and we fundraised and took over supplies. And I said, oh, okay. So what else did you do with this? Oh, we had to do fundraising. I had to recruit everyone. I had to organise all the travel. There were lots of things involved in this. And I sat there for a moment and I said, just talking about this, can you see how this could be relevant? And it was like a big aha moment, one of those moments where she's like, actually, this really could help me. So begin to consider things outside of, education or employment, because at your stage of your career, there won't be a lot of evidence that's going to match the criteria for applying. But that's not necessarily what people are looking for. They're looking for these skills outside of employment. So you may have had a part-time job. So many people say, well, I worked at Waitrose for 5 years while I was at university. Okay, well, how was that relevant? What can you bring in? I'm in a sports team. I volunteer. Caring for family members. This is a big deal. And so many people say, well, I'm responsible for a family member who's aging or who's unwell. Lots of things you do within that role are really relevant. It's about commitment, it's about timekeeping, it's about taking responsibility. So begin to think of all these different things you do that you may not have conscious awareness or you may not have connected as relevant to your application. So being a member of a club, non-academic achievements, they are all going to be relevant. So just approach this with it's all relevant until it's not. And we'll talk through how you can do that. So what I like in the application process too is really, if you were selling a pair of night trainers on eBay, or there's other sites, Vinted, whichever site, would you just say they're a pair of night trainers? Or would you put a picture? Would you talk about size? Would you talk about the condition? Are they limited edition? Are they hardly worn? You would be going into detail about these trainers in order to sell them. And this is really the same metaphor that you need to transfer over for the application process. You turning up and saying, my name's Sharon and I'm a coach, is really not going to give the level of detail required for somebody to buy into me. So really get to know who you are. What are your values? What's important to you? What message would you like to get across throughout the whole of the process? So the how, what you can do is look at relevant job and person specs and list all the requirements down. Now, there could be loads of requirements, so it could be quite overwhelming. So you might want to break these down just 2 at a time, or maybe look for common themes. And for each requirement, just do a mind map of anything you think is relevant. And do this without judgment. Do this without, that, oh, no, that's not going to make sense. That's not relatable. Just be curious about what comes up and let the mind map flow. Almost let the pen just run away with a mind map about how these could link in. And for each relevant example, for each answer, you want to give a relevant example, and we'll talk through the STAR process and how you can give a really good example. But just remember the feedback model. What are you learning about yourself along the way? What's new? What's no longer relevant? And practice talking through these examples. Get really comfortable with yourself. Get really comfortable with expressing who you are and what you've done and how you've done it. So the STAR method is fantastic, and every single recruiter has got this on their social media. They've got this on their websites, really promoting this. And I really like this framework because it actually gives it a tangible method for people to go into interviews and understand how to explain what they've done, what experience they've had. So this is all about the S is for situation. So you need to introduce the situation, give context around it. So if we think about the guides model, well, actually, I was leader in the guides. We were going to do an expedition. It was going to be to Africa. And then you're looking at the tasks. What things did you need to complete? What were the expectations and what were the challenges? And be mindful, challenges are really powerful. If you can demonstrate times where you've overcome challenges, where you've actually pushed through, where you've used that feedback model, then actually that's really going to work in your favor. Challenges aren't something to hide within interviews, but actually if you can demonstrate how you work through them, this is going to be really positive for you. And action, explain what you did and how you did it. So talking through the process, but remembering to keep it concise. So being really clear about the key actions you took. And then, of course, the result. What was the end result? What was the impact? What feedback did you get? So if we look at this guides example again, well, actually, it was 200 hours of volunteering time. All the guides got special certificates that they were able to use in their future, and we managed to fundraise this amount of money. So you're able to evidence the whole way through with a really clear picture of what you did, how you did it, what actions you took, and what the outcome was. So begin to use this model, especially for competency-based interviews. This is a really good framework for being able to give situational examples where you can demonstrate what you've done. And be concise. This can be really difficult, and confidence comes with practice. So practice your story and get to know the key areas. What can sometimes happen is that you have so much information that you just want to get your point across, but actually sit back and think, what are your key points? What are your examples? How would they match different questions? Actually, this example fits really well for teamwork, and this example fits really well for overcoming challenges. So think about this and be really clear. So always talk about remembering what your aim is when you're communicating. Be really clear about what you want to communicate and how you're going to communicate that. And remember to feed back into that STAR model for your process. That will be a really good guide. And the more confident and comfortable you become with the STAR model, the easier it will be for you to just follow that process without you even beginning to think about it. So your aim is to get to the point without rambling. Now, I worked with an amazing, he's now in his first seat, trainee who was working for the legal services unit within CMS. And it was an absolutely lovely coaching journey because we had somebody that was within CMS and working his way up to a position and a career within CMS. So it was really lovely. And we talked about, what did we use in the time that I coached you that really made the difference for you? And these were his key points. So he talked a lot about being concise, but he said actually recording myself, talking to myself, practicing in the mirror, doing mock interviews, seeing how I was coming across, really made the difference for him and developed his confidence. And at first it's a bit ick, we don't feel comfortable doing it, but the more we do it, the more confident we become, the more we create that pathway. Remember that mindset. If we create a pathway that begins to build confidence in what we're saying and how we present ourselves, that pathway will support you in the interview process. You'll know how to do it consciously and unconsciously. And when your unconscious is supporting you, it becomes so much more easy. So being authentic. Now, this is a really hard one because when you don't know the environment, and for many people, this will be the first time you may be going through an application process of any sort. It's how do you be authentic in an environment that you don't really know? And I talk a lot about authenticity in my work because it's really important. We don't need to be robots. And the more we try to be who we think we should be, the less confident we become, because we're constantly looking for who should I be in this situation. We can't be in ourselves. We can't relax. We can't trust our own judgment because we're constantly checking in, what should I be doing? So the best thing to do is this exercise. And I love this exercise. I use it a lot in coaching when there's imposter syndrome and lots of other things at play. So think about who you should be. So these are the shoulds. They're kind of like that parent or the teacher. You should do this. You should be professional. You should be approachable. You should have all the knowledge of law. And write them down. And it might be different. Well, it will be different for every single person because the shoulds will be based on values and beliefs that you hold dear. This is who I should be if I'm going into law. I should be professional, I should be confident. And just list them, see where the list takes you, and then do a list of who you actually are. And think about you outside the world of law, outside, the application process, and think of all those qualities you already have. So I often hear I'm fun, I'm outgoing, I'm friendly, I'm approachable. I hate being late, and I've got a great education. So fun definitely comes out, outgoing, friendly. And then what you want to do is to find your middle point. So actually within this environment, authentic me would combine the two. So I would be outgoing and friendly, but I would be approachable and knowledgeable. And how would those two match together? What would be different? And this will give you a really good framework of how to become authentic as you move forward in whatever your career, in whatever organization you go into, is to create that person you want to be as a professional within your career and as you begin to move forward. Great. So I'm going to tell you the greatest story. And this one really lights me up because I recently worked with somebody who was in the LSU again, and she'd had some feedback during the early stages of the assessment days to say that actually didn't come across very confident. So she came along to my session and she's like, I need help with confidence. I'm not confident. And I was like, okay, so tell me a bit about that. And I said, okay, so you're giving me lots of examples of where you may not be confident, but actually, when are you confident? And she's like, and she thought for a little bit. And I said, okay, well, tell me a bit about what you've done in the past. Now, this amazing woman had been a tour guide in Spain, had managed to guide tours in different languages in another country, had spoken to masses of people in her time and really enjoyed it. And it really was one of those things that really motivated her. And I said, wow, that's evidence of how unconfident you are. And we kind of laughed about it. But actually, what we began to do was to give a term of reference. So that understanding back to the brain that actually there are times where you are confident. Confident is one of those skills that it grows. And in a new environment, it may not be as strong as in experienced environments. So those first times where your brain doesn't know the reference, but begin to remember all those times you have been confident. And actually, I'm really happy to say, and this is probably why I'm quite smiley about it, this woman was successful and she'll be starting her traineeship with CMS. And it was really just about getting her to recognize what's already there. So begin to think about when you're entering the recruitment arena, your brain not having that term of reference. It won't know how to process this, which may lead you or trick you into thinking you're not confident. So sit with all those times you were confident and begin to remember you are a confident person. You are just entering a new place. So these are the great questions that you can ask yourself when you're not feeling confident. Is it true? So when we think about the example of the tour guide, I'm not confident. Well, is this true? Is it always true? Is it true in every setting? When is it not true? Well, actually, when I was a tour guide. Okay, so begin to think about the times where this belief is not true. And that will begin to reassure you and to rebuild that confidence. And remember to use the word, I don't feel confident yet. So when the word yet is used, the brain then believes that there's options. It believes that there's feedback and it can move forward. And begin to list all those things. I don't feel confident yet. However, in the past, I've applied for uni. I've moved away from home. I've travelled. I've worked part-time. Think of all those times where you have been confident and begin to challenge that belief that you were not confident. Great. So building rapport, I always include this in any communication. So when we're building rapport, remember how I talked about all that information coming into the unconscious and it matching? Rapport is actually getting that connection unconsciously. So these are things we do all the time and we don't realize the importance of it or how much it does build that connection. That connection is allowing a person to actually listen to our message. So the brain will switch on, go, this person's okay because they're doing these things. And it will identify, I'm going to lean in to whatever that person's saying. So looking at body language, now matching and mirroring is one of those techniques that if you get it wrong, it looks quite robotic. So what I always say in the early stages is just to lean in with your posture and body language. So if somebody is sitting upright and their arms are open and their hands are down forward, you can begin to just open your chest up and maybe just match sitting in a way where your hands are resting. So not in a robotic way, but just in a way that mirrors what they're doing. Check your body language. Are you open? Are you smiling? Are you facing front on? And this can be difficult when you're online. I will give you a great technique, but also you may be in front of panels where there'll be more than one person. What do? If you sit front on with your chest open, you're able to move your body enough to give that connection to each person. And remember, your body language will really help support your message and what you hope to portray. Eye contact. Now, this is so important. Back in my day, which was a really long time ago, we were told if you went for a job interview, you had to give eye contact. Like, it was drummed into you. Make sure you give good eye contact. And do you remember teachers at school? Look at me when I'm talking to you. So everyone's been told you need to give good eye contact. But what they are beginning to recognize in neuroscience is actually we need our eyes to move in order to connect our brain to our thoughts, to create pictures of what we need to communicate. So eye contact will be different for everyone. Also, we don't want a staring competition. And I've interviewed people where they're giving me such good eye contact, I don't want to look down because I feel like I'm going to lose that competition of staring someone down. So just be mindful, give eye contact and give yourself time and space to look away. So you may find yourself kind of looking down as you're thinking of the answers. That's okay. But when you begin to give your answers, when you've had enough time to process, give a little bit of eye contact and then continue talking. And then think of common ground. Now, I know this sounds like such a simple thing, but actually talking to a person in a professional setting on a personal level that's very general, we don't want to be too personal, from the weather to how was your journey, really gets the unconscious connecting. You feel like they're connecting with you as a person, not just somebody that's coming through the door for an interview. So all of those things will just begin to get the unconscious of you and the other person engaged. It'll make you feel more comfortable, but will also make the people interviewing you more connected and more ready to listen to your message. Great. So this is setting the scene, and this is really important, and I really want you to begin to think about this. So you've done all this great work, you've done great applications, you're all the way through. Now it's time for you to shine, for you to sit, and for you to be that person you want to be. So what I say to people is to be like a tree. So when you're going to interview, whether it's online or face to face, always use this. So you may have noticed my arms quite fly around as I'm talking. That's how I communicate. That's how I'm comfortable to do it. But I always have with me my tree-like stance. So I teach this to coaches and I teach this in training. So what you want to think about is that your feet are like your roots of the tree. So they're grounded and they're still. And then as the trunk begins to come up, this begins to remain still with some flexibility. So you're able to move, but the lower half of your body is nice and still. And your arms are your branches, so they can be free to help you express yourself as you're going through the interview. But a really good way to prepare and to get your mind calm is to practice this tree pose, because there's lots of muscle memory within the body. So you might want to sit in front of the computer that you use or in the chair that you use and just practice, really putting your feet to the ground, getting everything still and taking 3 nice deep breaths. That will naturally calm your body. And the more you do this, the more you practice this, the more your unconscious will go, oh, I know this, we're being like a tree, I'm going to be calm. So automatically, no matter what setting you're going into, whether it's an online interview, whether it's a face-to-face interview, whether it's an assessment, your body will be nice and calm and supporting you. The things you want to ensure is your lighting, your background, and your camera all set to go. So be really mindful what's in the background. Where are you doing this? Where are you doing your interview if it's online? What can people see? Can they see you? And also remember all your backups. Is your internet working? Is everything charged? Do you have your chargers in place if you need to recharge them? And plan your journey for your interview. This is a new one. So for so long we've been working online and we forget there's a journey. But when we do these and when we take all these steps, by the time you're sitting down, you're ready to interview, you're calm and you're ready to go. And do your research on the company. Why them? What is it that makes this special to you? What is it about the company's values, the ethos, and their culture? And this is really important because so many people would have interviewed so many people before you. They want to know why you're buying into their organization, what it is about them that makes them special. So, for example, CMS pride themselves on being future facing. Now, just looking at that doesn't really make sense, but if you dig down, you know this will be about their technology and how they plan to move forward. How could you match this to your values? So really get to know the companies and the organizations. So that is all from me. Thank you very much for listening. We're going to have a Q&A session. I hope that was useful, and any questions, please feel free to ask away. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Sharon. So I think we're going to take a short break now, but they'll give you a chance to get all of those questions in for Sharon in just a moment. Welcome back after that short break, and thank you so much to Sharon for that. That was absolutely brilliant, and I've certainly learned a lot. And some of those skills and hints and tips and will be so brilliant, not just for your application processes, but for your future careers and beyond. And I certainly was taking notes during that. So thank you so much for that, Sharon. So we've just got a few questions to get through. We'll try and get through them with the time that we have left. So we've got another question. Is there anything you can suggest to mask physical effects of kind of lack of confidence? So, if you're kind of visibly nervous or anxious about an interview, for example, how can we present ourselves in a way that potentially doesn't come across?
Brilliant. And this is a really good question because I get asked this a lot. Now, there's a few things that you can do that will naturally calm yourself down. The tree exercise is actual a mindfulness exercise. It will reset your adrenal glands, which will naturally calm you down. I would say have a glass of water with you because when the mouth is dry, it signals that you're anxious and will release the adrenaline. So make sure you're sipping water. But I would begin to practice a pose. So say if some people shake because the adrenaline in their body. So practice just putting your hands calmly under the table and maybe just cup them. But practice doing this before the interview while taking deep breaths. And that muscle memory will kick in. So you may find just by doing this, you naturally begin to calm down. And don't put pressure on yourself. Quite often people go, oh, did you see how nervous I was? And I was like, I didn't. But for the person experiencing it, it's very real and it's very out there.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sharon. I think that kind of builds on we're much more aware of it. So often, if we feel nervous and we think that we're coming across, it's much more obvious to us as the person than people watching. So thanks for that. And just to build on that, do you have any recommendations in terms of, for example, if you start rambling during an interview or you've kind of started off on the wrong foot with your response and you think, hang on a minute, I want to backtrack. What's the kind of best way to kind of U-turn or turn around to kind of get back on track if you've kind of gone off on a tangent or you kind of not quite sure in the way that you've started your response?
Absolutely. And Anita, I'm sure you feel this way too. In an interview, if somebody feels like that, if they actually honestly say, hold on, I've gone off on the wrong track, let me rethink that and recompose themselves, then actually that's a really nice place to be as an interviewer, that the people feel confident enough to kind of say, hold on, I'm going to rethink. And that's much better than listening to an answer that's not concise or doesn't get the point across, because the question will be re-asked anyway. So maybe just say, just give me a minute. I'm just going to rethink that question and remember the STAR process. So if your mind's wandering and where do I go with this? Just take a step back, have a sip of water, have a little think, and then go again with your question. But be honest, it's okay.
Definitely, definitely. And just to kind of add from an early talent perspective, we really do urge you to take your time and don't feel like you've got to respond immediately. Do ask us to repeat or rephrase questions. If you need to take a moment, take a sip of water. We encourage you to do that, to really take that time. Don't feel like you've got to kind of got to respond straight away. We want you to be your best self, and if that means taking a moment to reflect on the question, compose yourself, or asking us to rephrase the question, then please, please, please do that. So I just got one more question, Sharon, if that's all right, and then quite a
Absolutely.
nice way to end the Q&A. So, what's your biggest success story that you've seen during your time coaching, and why do you think it was so successful?
Wow, that's. Do you know what that's a really good question because I've worked with homeless young people and refugees, and I've coached across so many disciplines, but every single person's journey who I coach is an honor for me to be with. So to measure their success against each other wouldn't be fair. I think in terms of, we've done everything from have a homeless young person become a youth worker to have somebody go and get their traineeship to people making partner. So everybody's journey is differently. But I think the biggest success from coaching for me as an individual, if I'm being completely honest, is seeing somebody in a different position to where they started with self-awareness and self-compassion and self-belief. And I know that's a very general answer, but it's my true answer. It's my truth. Every journey's lovely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sharon. And what a lovely way to end that Q&A. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to finish by asking you the same question that we did at the top of today's session, which is following today's session and Sharon's words of wisdom, how confident do you now feel with presenting and communicating with impact? So while you're taking some time to submit those responses, I just wanted to highlight to you the upcoming events for the rest of the virtual event series. We're over halfway through now, but we've got lots of really exciting events that you can engage with over the next 3 weeks. So on Friday, we are having our responsible business session. We're joined by members of our responsible business and social impact team, and they're going to be sharing all the great work that we're doing at CMS towards being a responsible business. And we're also going to be joined by one of our partners who will be sharing all the great work he has been involved with. And then next week, we've got an imposter syndrome session. So building quite nicely, I think, on from today's session in terms of how we tackle that and combat that and be able to communicate and be our best self. And imposter syndrome is something that affects everyone at all levels. So having understanding of that and how we can use it to our advantage. So that would be a really, really great session there. Then we've got our Be Your Whole Self session, which is in partnership with our Embrace network, which is empowering ethnic minority communities within CMS to feel included and supported at CMS. And then our final week, we're hosting our last two sessions, London, the regions and beyond, sharing insight into what life is like outside of London and internationally at CMS. And we're going to finish with our future facing law session, which is going to be run by our innovation and legal tech team. So still loads of really, really exciting events to be a part of. And all of the sessions from the series so far have been recorded and will be available on our website. So if you wanted to re-watch this session, I appreciate there were some technical difficulties on today's event and we do apologize for that, but the recording will be available so you can re-watch anything that you may have missed and any of the events so far in the series. And just remember to do visit that CMS portal that you will have had access to on registration of this event, and that will provide you with lots of hints and tips on how to ace the application process from now, and it'll be available all the way until the new year. So we've just had the results of the poll, and it's brilliant to see that 66% of you are now very confident, with the remainder of you confident. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Well
Really
done.
lovely, really lovely to see that that it's had an impact. It certainly had an impact on me. So that wraps up the session. Thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for those technical difficulties, but clearly the event still had impact, which is really lovely to see. And I look forward to seeing you at future events in the series. Goodbye.